The blood-red sun cast long shadows over the dusty main street of Bodie, California, as Silas Xavier rode into town with nothing but ghosts at his back and a hollow space where his heart should have been. The year was 1878, and the mining boomtown was still riding high on silver fortunes and shattered dreams. His weathered face told the story of a man who had seen too much, done too much, and lost everything that mattered along the way. Grace Nelson wiped the counter of her small apothecary shop, watching the stranger dismount with the easy grace of a man born to the saddle. She had come to Bodie 2 years prior, fleeing the suffocating expectations of Boston society after her husband's death had left her both wealthy and alone. At 26, she had built something of her own here, something honest, even if loneliness followed her like a faithful shadow. The bell above her door chimed as the stranger entered, ducking his head slightly under the frame. His eyes, a startling blue against sun-darkened skin, scanned the neat shelves of tonics and remedies before settling on her. "Madam," he said, removing his hat, "I was told you might have something for pain." Grace noted the way he held his left arm stiffly against his side. "Injury or ailment?" "Bullet graze. 3 days back." His voice was gravel and whiskey, worn by wind and silence. "Let me see it," she said, gesturing toward the back room. When he hesitated, she added, "I trained under a doctor in Boston. I know what I'm doing." In the small back room that served as both stockroom and treatment area, Grace instructed him to remove his shirt. The wound was angry and red, but not yet festering. "You're lucky," she said, preparing to clean it. "Another day without treatment, and you'd be in real trouble." "Luck's got nothing to do with it," he replied flatly. "Can't kill what's already dead." Grace's hands paused in their work. "No man walking and talking is dead, Mr. Xavier. Silas Xavier. And you'd be surprised." The corner of his mouth twitched in what might have been an attempt at a smile. "Been riding with ghosts so long I'm halfway to being one myself." She worked in silence for a few minutes, cleaning the wound and preparing a poultice. "This will sting," she warned, before applying it. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink, as if pain was such a constant companion that he no longer noticed its presence. "What brings you to Bodie, Mr. Xavier?" she asked, wrapping a clean bandage around his arm. "Just passing through. Looking for work, maybe. You don't strike me as a silver miner." His laugh was hollow. "No, madam. Been a lot of things, but never that." "And what are you now?" His eyes met hers, and something shifted in their blue depths. "Nothing. Nobody. Just a man who's lived too long and seen too much. Everyone's somebody, Mr. Xavier." "Not me," he said, standing and reaching for his shirt. "The cowboy days are behind me, the war before that. Whatever I was died somewhere along the way." Grace finished securing the bandage, her fingers lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary on his skin. "That'll be 50 cents for the treatment and supplies." He placed a silver dollar on the table. "Keep the change. For your trouble." "Will you be staying in town?" she asked as he buttoned his shirt. "A few days. Got nowhere particular to be. Come back tomorrow. I'll need to change that dressing." He nodded once, placed his hat back on his head, and left without another word. Grace watched him go, wondering what had hollowed out the man who moved like a shadow through her door. That night, as Grace closed her shop, Sheriff Thomas Miller stopped by, as he often did. "Saw you had a visitor today," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "New fellow in town." "Just passing through," he said. Grace organized her shelves, avoiding the sheriff's eyes. Thomas had been courting her, in his awkward way, for nearly a year. He was a good man, steady and kind, but something vital was missing between them. "Might want to be careful around that one," Thomas said. "Been asking about him. Fought for the Union, then rode with some rough outfits in Texas. Some say he was a gun for hire for a spell." Grace turned to face him. "He's injured and needed treatment. That's all." Thomas nodded, though his expression remained concerned. "Just looking out for you, Grace. Town like Bodie attracts all sorts." "I appreciate it, Thomas, but I can manage." After the sheriff left, Grace found herself thinking about the stranger's eyes. They were the eyes of a man who had seen hell and carried pieces of it with him. The next morning brought Silas back to her shop, as instructed. He looked rested, though the shadows beneath his eyes suggested sleep came rarely and with difficulty. "How's the arm feeling?" she asked, gesturing him toward the back room again. "It's been worse," he said, which she was learning was his way of saying it hurt considerably. As she unwrapped the bandage, she noticed fresh bruises on his knuckles. "Trouble last night." He glanced down at his hands. "Difference of opinion at the saloon. Nothing serious. The sheriff mentioned you've been asking around town." His jaw tightened. "Sheriff talks too much. He's protective. It's his job. Of the town, or of you specifically?" His perceptiveness caught her off guard. "Both, I suppose." She applied fresh salve to his wound. "He says you were a soldier. Long time ago. And after?" His eyes met hers, challenging. "After was a lot of things I don't care to remember." "Why the interest, Miss Nelson?" "Mrs.," she corrected automatically. "And curiosity. We don't get many strangers who aren't chasing silver dreams. Your husband in the mines." "My husband is dead. For years now." Something in his expression softened, just for a moment. "I'm sorry. It was a sudden illness. Nothing anyone could have done." She finished with the bandage. "You never answered my question from yesterday. What are you now, Mr. Xavier?" He stood, reaching for his shirt. "Like I said, I'm nothing. Got no purpose, no direction. Just riding until the road or the bullet that has my name on it finally finds me." Grace studied him, seeing past the hardened exterior to something wounded beneath. "Everyone has a soul, Mr. Xavier. Even you." The cowboy said, "I've got no soul." His voice was flat, matter of fact, as if stating that the sky was blue or water was wet. She smiled, genuine and warm. "Then let me share mine till you feel it again." His expression shifted, surprise replacing the practiced neutrality. For a moment, he seemed unable to find words. Then he put his hat back on, nodded once, and left without paying or saying goodbye. Grace watched him go, wondering if she'd overstepped or touched something too raw. But there was something about Silas Xavier that called to her, something familiar in his loneliness that matched her own. For 3 days, Grace didn't see Silas. She heard rumors that he'd taken a job as security for one of the larger mining operations, that he'd broken up a knife fight at Harvey's saloon without drawing his gun, that he kept to himself and spoke little. She told herself it was just curiosity that made her listen for news of him, nothing more. On the 4th day, as she was closing her shop, he appeared in her doorway, silhouetted against the setting sun. "Your arm healing properly?" she asked, as if it had been hours rather than days since they'd last spoken. "Seems to be." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I came to pay what I owe." "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Xavier." "Silas," he said. "And I do." He placed several coins on the counter. "For the second treatment." She nodded, accepting the payment. "Found work, I hear. Temporary. Just until I move on." "And when will that be?" He studied her face, as if searching for something. "Haven't decided yet. Bodie has its charms, once you get past the dust and the drunks," she said with a small smile. "It's got its share of good people, too." His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "You have family here?" She shook her head. "Just me. Came west after my husband died. Needed something new." "And did you find it?" "Parts of it." She met his gaze steadily, still looking for others. Something passed between them then, an understanding that transcended words. Silas cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "There's a town social on Saturday. At the church." He shifted his weight, suddenly awkward. "I wondered if you might want to go." Grace felt warmth spread through her chest. "I would like that very much, Silas." He nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I'll call for you at 7, then." After he left, Grace found herself humming as she finished her closing duties. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flutter of anticipation for something other than the next day's work. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a gentle breeze that kept the ever-present dust somewhat at bay. Grace spent more time than usual on her appearance, selecting a deep green dress that brought out the auburn highlights in her brown hair and the emerald of her eyes. Silas arrived precisely at 7, wearing a clean shirt and a string tie, his usually unruly dark hair slicked back. He'd shaved, revealing a strong jawline previously hidden beneath stubble. The transformation was striking. He looked younger, less haunted. "You look beautiful," he said as she opened the door, the words coming out gruff but sincere. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." The church hall was decorated with paper lanterns and wildflowers, a small band playing in one corner. Nearly everyone in Bodie seemed to be there, and Grace felt the weight of curious stares as she entered on Silas's arm. "People are watching," he murmured. "Let them." She smiled up at him. "It gives them something to talk about besides silver prices." They danced, somewhat awkwardly at first. Silas moved with the stiff precision of a man who knew the steps, but rarely practiced them. As the evening progressed, however, they found their rhythm, moving together more naturally. During a break in the dancing, Sheriff Miller approached them, his expression carefully neutral. "Evening, Grace." "Xavier." "Sheriff," Silas acknowledged with a nod. "Enjoying yourselves?" "Very much," Grace replied. "It's a lovely event." "Glad to hear it." Thomas's eyes shifted to Silas. "Just wanted to let you know there's been some talk. Men from the Bonanza mine saying they recognize you from somewhere. Thought you should be aware." Silas's posture stiffened. "Appreciate the warning." After Thomas moved on, Grace turned to Silas. "Is there going to be trouble?" "No," he said firmly. "Not tonight. Not around you." But the evening's ease had been disrupted. Silas grew more watchful, his eyes constantly scanning the room. When a group of miners entered, loud and already half drunk, he suggested they leave. "I should get you home," he said, guiding her toward the door. Outside, the night had turned cool, stars bright in the clear mountain sky. They walked in silence, Silas's hand resting lightly at the small of her back. "Are you going to tell me what that was about?" Grace asked when they reached her door. He hesitated, conflict clear in his expression. "It's not a story for tonight." "When then?" "Before you ride out of town without a word." "Is that what you think I'd do?" "I don't know what you'd do, Silas. I barely know you." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of soap and leather. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Why you carry so much weight. Why your eyes look so haunted. Why you think you've lost your soul. That's not a burden anyone should have to share. What if I want to?" She reached up, touching his face gently. "What if I've been carrying my own ghosts and know what it's like to walk alone?" For a moment, he seemed about to speak, but instead, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle at first, almost hesitant, but deepened as she responded, her arms encircling his neck. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily. "I should go," he said, his voice rough. "Or you could stay. We could talk." He shook his head. "Not tonight. There are things I need to settle first. Promise me you won't leave without saying goodbye." His eyes held hers. "I promise." The next morning, Grace awoke to urgent knocking. She opened her door to find Thomas, his face grim. "There was trouble last night. At the Bonanza bunkhouse. 2 men dead, another badly wounded." Her heart sank. "Silas. Gone. His room at the boarding house is cleared out. Horse is missing from the livery. He wouldn't. The wounded man says it was Xavier. Says he came looking for someone specific." Grace shook her head. "There must be some mistake. I'm riding out with a posse. Thought you should know." His expression softened. "I'm sorry, Grace. I warned you about him." After Thomas left, Grace stood in her doorway, staring down the empty street toward the mountains that rimmed the valley. She couldn't believe Silas would kill in cold blood, couldn't reconcile the man who had kissed her so tenderly with a murderer. And he had promised not to leave without goodbye. She closed her shop that day, unable to focus. As evening fell, she sat by her window, watching the street. Just after midnight, a soft tapping at her back door startled her. Heart racing, she opened it to find Silas, his face bruised, a fresh cut above his eye. "You're hurt," she said, pulling him inside. "It's nothing." His voice was strained. "I had to see you before I go. Thomas told me what happened. He says you killed those men. Not the way he thinks." Silas sank into a chair, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. One of those men was Jedediah Walker. He led a raid on a settlement in Kansas during the war. Killed everyone, women, children, old men. I was part of the unit sent to find them after. What I saw there. He closed his eyes briefly. "I swore I'd find every man responsible. You've been hunting them all this time?" "Tracking them. Making sure justice was served, one way or another. Walker was the last. And now it's over." He looked up at her, his eyes clearer somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. "I didn't come here looking for him. That was chance. But finding him, ending it. Maybe it was meant to be this way." Grace knelt beside him, taking his hands in hers. "Let me help you. We can explain, no? The other men who died were his friends. They came at me, gave me no choice. But no jury will see it that way, not with my history. So you're leaving, just like that. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Come with me. The words hung in the air between them, unexpected and life-changing. What? Come with me, Grace. We can go north, maybe Oregon or Washington territory. Start fresh. You're asking me to leave everything I've built here, just like that? I'm asking for a chance. For both of us. His eyes held hers. I know it's selfish. I know it's too much to ask. But when I'm with you, I feel something I thought was dead forever. Your soul, she whispered. Yes. He stood, pulling her up with him. I have to go now. The posse will be back by morning. If you want to come, meet me at the old mining shack 3 miles north of town, sunrise. If not, I'll understand. He kissed her then, pouring everything he couldn't say into it. When he pulled away, she saw something new in his eyes, hope, fragile but real. Dawn. He repeated, and then he was gone, slipping out into the darkness. Grace stood motionless for several minutes, her mind racing. To leave everything behind, to follow a man she barely knew into an uncertain future, it was madness. And yet, the thought of never seeing Silas again, of returning to her solitary existence, felt like a death of its own kind. She moved quickly then, gathering only what was essential: clothes, money, a few precious keepsakes from her former life. By the time the eastern sky began to lighten, she had left a note for her assistant explaining that the shop was now hers, and was riding north, her heart pounding with equal parts terror and exhilaration. The old mining shack was barely visible in the pre-dawn light, a dilapidated structure half reclaimed by nature. For a terrible moment, she feared Silas hadn't waited, that she was too late. Then he stepped out of the shadows, relief washing over his features when he saw her. You came, he said simply. I came. She dismounted, moving toward him. I don't know if this is wisdom or madness. Maybe both. He took her hands. I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise that as long as there's breath in my body, I'll protect you, provide for you, and do everything in my power to make you happy. I don't need protection or provision, she said. I just need you. The real you, not the ghost you've been pretending to be. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face. I'm starting to remember who that is. They rode north, avoiding main roads and towns where news might have traveled. Days turned into weeks as they made their way through the Sierra Nevada mountains and into the lush valleys of Northern California. They traveled as husband and wife, though no vows had been spoken. In each small settlement, they learned something new about each other, sharing stories and building trust. Grace discovered that Silas had been a teacher before the war, that he loved poetry and could recite Whitman from memory. Silas learned that Grace had trained as a nurse during the war, that her husband had been kind but the marriage arranged, and that she had lost a child before coming west. In a small settlement near the Oregon border, they stayed for nearly a month, Silas working as a ranch hand while Grace used her knowledge of medicines to help the local doctor. It was there, on a clear autumn evening as they sat outside their rented cabin, that Silas asked her properly. I want to do this right, he said, kneeling before her. Grace Nelson, will you marry me? Not for convenience or safety, but because I love you more than I ever thought possible. Yes, she answered without hesitation. Because you've shown me that new beginnings are possible, even when you think all hope is gone. They were married by a traveling preacher the following Sunday, with wildflowers in Grace's hair and light in Silas's eyes that had been absent for too many years. They continued north, eventually settling in a small coastal town in Washington Territory, far from the reach of California law. With their combined savings, they purchased land, a modest farm with a view of the sea. Silas built their house with his own hands, and Grace planted an herb garden that soon became known throughout the region for its healing properties. Winter came and went, and with spring came news that Grace was expecting. As her body changed, nurturing new life, Silas's transformation continued as well. The nightmares that had plagued him grew less frequent, and the distant look in his eyes appeared only rarely now. On a warm summer evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over the Pacific, Grace took Silas's hand and placed it on her swollen belly. Feel that? He's strong, like his father. Or she's determined, like her mother, Silas countered with a smile. Do you ever regret it? she asked. Leaving everything behind. He turned to her, his expression serious. I left nothing of value behind. Everything that matters is right here. Even after all this time, I sometimes worry you'll disappear. Go back to hunting ghosts. He shook his head. Those ghosts are laid to rest. The only thing I'm hunting now is our future. He placed his hand over hers. You asked me once if I remembered what it felt like to have a soul. I do now. It feels like this. Their son, Samuel Thomas Xavier, was born as the first snow of winter fell, healthy and strong with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. As Silas held his son for the first time, tears flowed freely down his face, tears of joy, of release, of a healing so complete it seemed miraculous. Life wasn't always easy. There were hard winters and failed crops, illness and worry. There were nights when the past crept back into Silas's dreams, when grace would hold him as he fought battles long over. But there was also laughter, growth, and a love that deepened with each passing year. Their family grew. A daughter, Elizabeth, joined them 2 years after Samuel, and later another son, Michael. Their farm prospered, and their reputation for fairness and generosity made them respected members of the community. Few knew their full story, but those who did kept their secrets, recognizing that redemption sometimes requires a fresh start. On their 20th anniversary, as they walked along the beach near their home, gray now streaking both their hair, Grace asked, "Do you ever think about Bodie? About what might have happened if we'd stayed?" Silas considered the question, watching the waves crash against the shore. "I think I would have died there if not by the law, then by my own hand eventually. The weight was too much to carry alone." "You weren't alone, even then," she reminded him. "You just didn't know it yet." He stopped, turning to face her. The years had been kind to Grace, the lines around her eyes speaking of laughter rather than sorrow. "You saved me, you know, when you offered to share your soul with mine." She smiled, reaching up to touch his weathered face. "No, we saved each other. That's what love does. It completes what's broken, finds what's lost." Still philosophical after all these years, he teased, but his eyes were serious. "I never thought I'd have this. A life, a family, peace. You always had a soul, Silas Xavier. You just needed to remember how to feel it." As the sun set behind them, casting long shadows across the sand, they walked home hand in hand, two people who had found in each other the courage to begin again, to believe that even the deepest wounds could heal, and that love, when freely given, had the power to restore what seemed forever lost. In the years that followed, their children grew and started families of their own, building homes nearby. Grandchildren filled their days with new joy, and as age slowly claimed its due, Silas and Grace faced it together with the same quiet strength that had carried them through everything else. And if sometimes, on clear nights when the stars seemed close enough to touch, Silas would look up and whisper thanks to whatever fate or providence had led him to that dusty street in Bodie, to that moment when a kind-hearted woman with healing hands had offered to share her soul with his until he found his own again, well, that was between him and the heavens and the remarkable woman who slept peacefully beside him, her heart beating in time with his own.